This is Bad Movies We Love, part of the Sheist Podcast Network.
Hello, welcome. Gather round as we congregate once again for another episode of Bad Movies We Love. And this is another one of the Season 1 episodes. Season 1, Episode 5. And I got to talk about one of my favorite bad movies of all time. And I was joined by the co-founder of the Sheist International Film Club, Mr. Jacob Ayoo, and you may remember him from the Sheist podcast. And you might be hearing that name again in the not-too-distant future, but in this case, he stopped by to talk with me about the 1999 action, sci-fi, adventure, western disaster. It's the one, the only, Wild Wild West.
Of course, I hated the dialogue.
Drumming on the white girl's boobies.
It's a comedy dead zone.
Oh, really? I thought they built hydraulics to lift this train off the track. Like, that would be completely inexpensive.
Unmitigated disaster.
Will Smith admitted that this is his worst movie to date.
Was this really necessary? This is definitely not how the West was won.
Welcome back to the show, my friend, Mr. Ayoo, my co-chairman of the Sheist International Film Club from Nairobi, Kenya. How you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. How are you doing?
I'm doing much better, thank you. And we had talked, I don't know, probably months ago, in passing about Wild Wild West. And I approached you about coming on and joining me for an episode of Bad Movies We Love. And if you had to tell the audience why you would choose this movie as a movie you love, give me maybe a couple sentences on why this is the movie that we're doing today.
Wild Wild West poses this not very pressing question. Can a comedy be used? Can we use that term in the broadest possible sense, costing something north of $100 million, hoping to succeed solely by doing that kind of a movie? That is something unbelievable, because according to how the film was shot and how it came into the cinemas, into the box office, for me it was a killer. It was a killer. It surpassed expectations to some, and some it didn't.
That's fair. As a kid, I really liked this movie. It came out in 99. So I was a sophomore in high school. I was 15. So it kind of gave me something that wasn't like anything else in the theaters at the time. It combined my enjoyment of Westerns with more of a sci-fi adventure feel. Even though watching it now, I didn't really feel that it was as much science fiction as I initially thought as a kid. But even though I enjoyed it, and even though I watched it many times after its initial release, I always sort of understood that it's not what I would call a good movie. It has a lot of weird issues to it, but I think that kind of quirkiness and just the like you said, that this movie cost so much money to make, yet it still struggles in so many like simple areas. It's this weird time capsule from the late 90s of we're gonna like put star power in it. We're going to throw like special effects in it. We're going to put a bunch of writers together and try and make this funny. We're going to try and make it action packed. We're going to try and jam in so much stuff into this movie and just have it be successful because of that it has a very unique identity, like right at the end of that decade. And we had talked about this briefly when we did our film club meeting last week, that Will Smith turned down doing The Matrix to do this movie. And, in hindsight, of course, it was not a great decision. The Matrix went on to spawn many sequels at that point. It was beloved. But at the time, the Wachowskis were not a proven commodity. This concept of The Matrix wasn't going to be something that exploded in popularity. And even when The Matrix first came out, it was kind of like an indie hit. And then it exploded after, I think, it hit like home video and more people were able to see it and get their hands on it. But, Will Smith returned to working with a director he had worked with in the past here. And in the first scene for this movie, I immediately thought Men in Black. And I mean, that's because this film was directed by Bary Sonnenfeld, who worked with Will Smith on Men in Black. So it's interesting just tonally that it was trying to capitalize on the success of Men in Black. It was trying to capitalize on the star power of Will Smith. It was trying to take advantage of the fact that Will Smith is he's done comedy and done it well, but trying to take advantage of that same space of action comedy that Men in Black was able to hold within the market and like be successful in. So you could just tell like what this movie ideally wanted to capitalize on, but as I watched it yesterday, like I still had fun with it because like I still knew which parts in the movie I liked. I knew what was going to happen when it was going to happen. And there's still a lot of individual elements that I enjoyed about this movie watching it again. But it was much easier to see why someone would say that this movie is really bad. Now that I've spent the last 5-6 years writing about film and, I do podcasts about movies and stuff. So now that I have a much broader scope for like cinematic integrity, it was much easier to pick out all of the little things that you can identify as like, this is not a good movie. But that being said, I still had fun with it and I would still watch it again and I would still recommend it to people that haven't seen it yet because of how uniquely strange it is.
Yeah. See, Wild Wild West is it's a 1999 production, yeah?
Yeah.
And when you look back, that is how many years ago? That is 20 plus.
Yeah, 23.
23 years ago. So if you look at where the film industry was 21 years ago, 23 years ago to where it is right now, and considering actors like Salma Hayek, Will Smith, and the rest, with the kind of films they're being produced in right now, it's quite a contrast, And Wild Wild West, it's a comedy dead zone. And you stare in disbelief as things flop and die, And if I watched it more than 21 years ago, I would have said, wow, I would have wowed at that factor because I was young and, I was just sitting down to enjoy films for the sake of passing time. But now when I sit down to watch a movie, I look at every single detail, the plot line, and where the story is headed to, and the cinematography, and the sound, and the camera B-rolls, and the camera movements, and the how do we call it? The script in itself, the dialogue, and you're like, even the choice of characters, and you're like, what were these set of writers thinking while they're doing it? Because the movie is all concept and no content. If we speak the truth, it's all concept and no content. And the elaborate special effects are like watching Moneyban on the screen. Something has gone wrong when a story is about two heroes in the Old West. And the last shot is of a mechanical spider riding off into sunset. That kind of stuff. Because I feel Will Smith and Calvin Kline co-star as special federal agents who are assigned by the President of the United States a grant to investigate the disappearance of lots of top scientists. And they stumble over a plot of assassinate grant by a megalomaniac, or rather a megalomaniac, who wants to give half the country back to Britain and Spain and keep the rest in the hands of the villain. And you're like, where is this story headed to? I want more of this story. I want it to make sense to me, not only in 1999, but even in 2029. You understand? And sometimes I sit down with the kind of knowledge I have for films, and I'm like, I want a writer to tell me a story. I want the cinematographer to tell me the story. And for the sake of the casts, we need casts who will tell this story and still deliver at the end of the day. Because 1 minute, Jim West is canoling with a lover in Water Tower, and the next, he is reminiscing about the slavery his family endured during the Civil War. I mean, Wild Wild West would be so awful if it played to Smith's strengths. But its efforts to manufacture blockbuster out of Smith results in so many bad creative decisions at every turn. I don't know what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. And you mentioned something about the writing. We're going to get into that in a little bit. I want to take a look at the trailer first. And it's, I haven't seen the trailer since this movie was about to come out. So I want to take a look at the trailer. We'll kind of get an opinion on what the movie maybe was trying to sell the audience, and then we'll get into some other stuff. All right, so let me grab that. Before we continue, this episode of Bad Movies We Love is brought to you by Slap Happy. We all have bad days. Maybe your boss treats you like crap. Maybe some D-bag cut you off on your way home. Or maybe some smartass is cracking jokes about your wife's hair. No matter the reason, we've probably all wanted to slap somebody at one time or another. However, most people aren't interested in risking assault charges, ruining their reputations, or destroying their careers. But now, Slap Happy has your solution. Your local forensics team would be jealous of their replica busts that are engineered with laboratory-grade calcium sulfate and encased in the highest quality ballistic gel on the market to ensure a truly satisfying and realistic smack. Beyond the authentic tactile response, Slap Happy's team of completely unlicensed and batshit crazy neuroscientists have developed a proprietary blend of serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin that are released as a molecular aerosol with every gratifying slap, so you get all of the rewards with none of the repercussions. So, what are you waiting for? Get slappy and get happy today with Slap Happy.
Before there was a Secret Service, before there was a CIA, before there was an FBI, there was
West. Jim West.
But behind every great man is a beautiful woman.
Stay out of my way, lady!
Lady, I'm a U.S. Marshal!
Now what?
Will Smith.
You're not the master of disguise that you think you are. You look nasty, just butt ugly.
Kevin Kline.
The collars around our necks seem to contain powerful magnets! When you tell this story to your grandkids, you make sure you leave this part out.
Kenneth Branagh. And Salma Hayek. From the director of Men in Black.
Nice hat.
When I roll into the
Whoa! That was fun.
when I bounce into the
Okay, so it tells me that they're going. We want to tell you that there's cool looking action. Like
Yeah.
Will Smith is going to be, you know, dressed and looking cool and beating people up. There's going to be
Yeah.
some explosions. And then we're going to also try and make this like a goofy buddy comedy. And also there will be almost James Bond-like presentation of his character to where he's
Exactly. Yeah.
almost a womanizer, but basically he'll just get the girl, whoever the girl is, and they're just like jamming a lot of things together. What did you think watching that?
You know, when I watched this, I saw the Black Superman kind of vibe from, remember Black Superman on Fast and Furious,
Mm-hmm.
Hobbs and Shaw. That's the kind of idea I had with Smith, and that's the kind of idea I had with Wild Wild West. And for adults with fond recall of the retro James Bond TV show, on which movie which the movie is based, and with more recent memories of the sharp yet genial bite of some sort of directing. The film is still an unmitigated disaster. That's especially so considering the hot-heated Jim West that is played by Will Smith. Is played by the collie circulating around, calculating around Will Smith, and his colleague Gordon, and by the subtle self regarding Kevin Kline as Dr. Loveless, who seems more amused by the absolute evil of any sort of audience that they are trying to show. You can really blame the actors for the failure of of a raft of screenwriters to provide them with even vaguely funny lines. Like I feel those lines were more forced. They're not natural. And even the action sequences, they're more, I believe, they're more edited, and they kind of force the action sequences to fit that movie. But then, I'm sorry to say so, but I feel they would have done better by letting it be more natural and just letting the actors, or rather the actors on set, just be themselves instead of forcing issues. I felt they really forced issues. Even in the trailer, yes, the trailer is so amazing. It gives you all the punches and all that. They want you to watch the movie. But now when you watch the movie, I need something more realistic. I need something more that I can relate with in normal life.
Yeah, like because of what this movie is, I'm never expecting it to be like hyper realistic, but even within the world that they're creating, they need to be able to get the audience to suspend their disbelief enough to buy into the story that they're trying to sell us. And you had mentioned something about the writers basically failing to give the actors enough to work with to make us believe them, right? And so there was probably more than 4 writers, but there was initially a pair of writers. It was S.S. Wilson and Brent Maddock that wrote the original script, and then Jeffrey Price and Peter Seaman came in and made started making changes, because it started as more of like a serious mystery Western. And they felt that it lacked humor, and that it lacked action, and that it lacked some of the things that the movie needed in order to compete with other films of the time, like Men in Black. And interestingly enough, I didn't know beforehand, but this was a story that was written by Jim and John Thomas. So this is the same guys that came up with the story for Predator. And I love Predator. Predator is significantly better in terms of getting you to just buy into the story. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was 1997, 6 or 7.
I think it was 87. Predator.
The first or the second Predator?
The first Predator with Arnold.
Oh, okay.
It was definitely in the 80s. I think it was 87. But look, that story is about a space alien hunting a group of mercenaries in the jungle in some like South American country. But the script is good enough where it gets you to just suspend your disbelief and believe in what's happening on the screen, right? And so in this, there was like so much rewriting going on, so much cross signaling going on that it was hard for the actors to ever find like what the tone of the film is, because it's all over the place. It wants to be a goofy buddy comedy. It wants to have like legitimate like kind of moments of not necessarily romance, but like lust and attraction. And then it wants to be kind of a sci-fi movie, and then it also wants to be a commentary on the post-Civil War era and slavery, and there's just so much cross communication going on. I don't blame any of the actors for not knowing who their character is really supposed to be or how they're supposed to portray that character. But you look at it, and Will Smith now has an Oscar. Kevin Kline has an Oscar. Kenneth Branagh has an Oscar. Salma Hayek is Oscar nominated. Like, this is an excellent cast that could have really put an interesting story together about someone who was a former slave, who became a lawman, and now has to go back into former Confederate territory in the U.S. and hunt down somebody that is looking to basically overthrow the U.S. government, right? Like, that's the general concept. But they pull back on all of that stuff so much in so many different moments, where you're taking an actor like Will Smith and you're telling him that, like, okay, this is your character and you're going to go to a Confederate like costume party, and then you offend them and they're going to lynch you. And now, like, lynching is not this like thing to make fun of, right? And so they have him go on this long monologue about like explaining why he was drumming on the white girl's boobies and just basically like cracking jokes to try to get out of being lynched. And it's very off base tonally. Like, set up this situation where like this guy is in a lot of danger. He's going back to revisit like some trauma of his past as well in doing this. And then he's standing up there basically doing a comedy routine while this stuff is going on in the background. So it's like little stuff like that where I'm watching it and being like, okay, like they completely like missed the point of what this story is actually doing here. And I did it like, if you take this movie and you make it serious and you try and really make it, you remove all the comedy and you make it like a true intentful action Western where these things are like at the forefront, maybe you're not able to sell it, or you're not able to get people to go see it because that's not what people are looking for like in the 90s. But like Tombstone came out in 1998 or so right around the same time as this. And there was an appetite for Westerns again. So I think you could have told a serious story, but again, you have Will Smith, you have Salma Hayek, you have Kenneth Branagh, you have Kevin Kline, you have all these good actors that can do so many different things. They just kind of pointed them all in different directions and hoped that it would work.
Yeah, definitely. You understand. I understand the film was it produced? Was it done by Warner Brothers?
I believe, yes, it was a Warner Brothers movie.
Yeah,
I think so. Let me see. Just have to edit all this part out when I'm looking.
Because you know why I'm saying that? Because in the 90s, making films of 60s TV shows was a major trend.
Yes, for sure.
And baby boomers were buying tickets to see, at the cinema what they had seen in their living rooms as kids. And so after movies like Batman, we got a cycle of remakes, mostly bad, like Lost in Space. Movies like Lost in Space. My favorite, Martin. Can you remember that movie?
Lost in Space.
Lost in Space.
Yeah.
Movies like that. And Wild Wild West was yet another one based on some quirky action adventure. For me, that was like some quirky action adventure series made to weather the Western genre's declining popularity by having it capitalize on some sort of James Bond craze, quote unquote. When you might call it spies in saddle, and this film I feel the Wild Wild West film version must have sounded great at that time, and that's why I don't know how I wasn't keen on looking at how it did in the box office back then, but I'm sure it did quite well than it could have done today. It's a fun film, no doubt about that. It's a crazy film. There's nothing serious going on, but when you look at the audiences today compared to the audiences back then, I don't think it is a film that would really make so much profit in the box office today.
Oh yeah, this movie would be an abject failure if it were released today.
Yes, because the kind of audiences right now, we critique everything. We critique and we ask questions and we want answers, and people just don't want substandard stuff. And I feel they would have done better. They would have sat down with that storyline and even done it more realistically, because I feel it was just a disaster. The script was rewritten, scenes were reshot, and the budget ballooned until it became one of the most expensive films of all time. And on release, it lost money and won 5 Razzies, including the worst picture. You understand? Worst screenplay, worst director. Smith has repeatedly joked about its failure. I mean, he's talked about it a number of times, and it may now be bundled alongside those 2 other self-afflicting franchise films of the late 90s, like Batman and Robin and the Avengers. And yet, whereas I think such clunkers could be enjoyed as weird camp classics that people just don't care about.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point about stuff from the 60s being recycled and turned into films, and enjoying these movies as these kind of clunkers. And I think specifically to something I was saying earlier too, is like it's very much an example of what was happening at the time. So it's an interesting time capsule film in like, here's where these ideas were like trying to capitalize on nostalgia, kind of similar to what we're seeing today. We're seeing a lot of films that come out 20, 30 years down the line that really should have had sequels made much closer to the original, but the appetite wasn't there. And now that all these people have grown up, now we want to see something like Ghostbusters Afterlife, right? Where it really doesn't offer that much new. It's just completely nostalgic to go back and revisit some of the themes and the characters, and it's just a better sequel than some of the other stuff that has come out and tried to fill that void. So it really just gets the original stuff back on track. But in this, they're taking a television show that, like you said, was kind of like campy, quirky adventure show with gadgets. So a little bit of Inspector Gadget, a little bit of Western. But what I was saying earlier about Will Smith and him being a former slave, like the idea to cast Will Smith in the lead for this and make him a black man set post Civil War in the United States comes with a heavy burden of responsibility to the story that you're going to tell. And they didn't decide to actually tell that story. It was almost like an afterthought to have that in the film. They joke about him getting lynched. The most important scene in the film is they're in the desert. They are kind of sitting by the fire, and he explains to Artemis that he finally saw his family again when they were butchered at New Liberty. And then he just says, "I'll help you get him, Jim." And the scene ends. So realistically, like all of the emotional, tumultuous stuff that comes along with this character and his history and the United States history as well, to get to this point where you've had these 2 guys at odds this whole time. They haven't really found any common ground other than having to work together. It's kind of been forced on them. And then you actually get this moment between these 2 guys that it's like finally all those barriers have broken down, and Jim West is going to give him an honest answer about his past and why this is important to him. And they cut the scene off and it's like 30 seconds long. So it's like they worked towards all of this only to throw it away and then go right back to like the kind of dumb action comedy that they, wanted it to be. And this is very much in the line of other buddy comedy movies that had come out at the time. I mean, there's like Tango and Cash. It's like even Lethal Weapon has some humor, but I wouldn't call it a comedy. But a lot of like buddy cop style movies were very popular through the 80s and 90s because you take Jim West, who's got style and sex appeal, and he loves guns and horses, and he's very much like a manly Western cowboy man. And then you take Artemis, who is into science and reading, and he likes to dress sometimes like a woman in this case. But the character introductions are the complete opposite. You have Kevin Kline in drag trying to get General McGrath like passed out so they can get information from him. And then you have Will Smith riding a horse and carriage that's full of dynamite, basically. So it's like, just here's these two different types of characters. We're going to slam them together because of this common goal that they have. And then we're going to force them to work together. And a lot of the movie is going to be them not getting along and not understanding how the other one works. And so there's going to be a lot of that. And even in the dialogue between them, it just seems like they didn't know which joke was going to work in the script. So they're like, you know what? We're going to have all 3 or 4 jokes in there, and whichever one the audience laughs at, we'll take credit for that one. Because there's a couple of scenes like that where it's like, it's funny, and then all of a sudden, like, the scene keeps going, and they just keep going for more and more unfunny versions of the same joke. And it's like, you should have just stopped at the one that actually worked. Like, why did you keep going past that?
Yeah. You're right, and you see that is also a determinant of the pace of the film, and you realize that the pace. I don't know about you, I felt the pace was off from the onset.
Yeah, you're right. I was actually surprisingly, I was getting sleepy watching this movie, but it's only really like an hour and 40 minutes of runtime.
49 minutes.
In the last 5 or 6 minutes is the credits rolling. But like towards the end of the movie, I was like, well, I already know what's going to happen. And it's like, it's nothing that's keeping me on the edge of my seat. They go from an action sequence to them like strolling through the desert, talking about how to make this work. And it's just, you're right about the pacing for sure. And I think that's definitely an indication of like, the rewrites on the script feeling the need to try to inject humor where they could, because obviously like the production studio was looking at like the test screenings or looking at the dailies and being like, well, this isn't funny enough. Like we need to have humor in here because we're trying to capitalize on like the summer audience. Like we want families, we want people that want action stuff, we want people that want comedies, we want everything. But in trying to be everything, you lose like the identity of you can't be everything. And when you try to be everything, you miss being at least one thing, because the one thing that like has universally stood out about this movie is that it's bad. Like aside from that, what is the one thing that people have talked about this entire time? Maybe the music video, the original song that was connected to it.
And that is why I was insisting you better choose your L to bite. I mean, you can't be all of it. You have to choose one thing to die for. Like you have to choose your poison, right? You can't die for everything. You can't be all over. And that's what I was saying earlier, that I feel the writers, the script writers, the directors, the producers, they had ideas, yes, but all of them wanted all their ideas to fit into an hour 49-minute movie. When you look when you look at the themes that they were trying to bring into the film, they were not well taken care of, so to say. They had various themes to have in the film and all that. Good ideas, I do not resist that, but they were all over. They were littered all over. The themes were littered all over. When you look at the sexism, when you look at the pace of that film, when you look at the sound, the sound is good, but the music, the thematic music, there were places where we didn't need them.
Yeah,
and
you're
that
right.
goes to the post-production,
I will say though, this was Elmer Bernstein who did the music, who is one of the great Hollywood composers of all time. Has
I know
done
him.
music for so many films since like the 50s basically. And when I first saw the opening credits roll, I was like, oh man, this has like, I remember this. It's got that really like uplifting kind of Western adventure score to it, that bump, bum, stuff that you would have heard of, like almost Indiana Jones like a little bit as well. But it does have that classic Hollywood Western uh, music to it. So it's trying to give it that kind of identity. But then in watching it, considering that it's an adaptation from a show from the 60s, it's interesting to think that this movie isn't really made for the audience that watched the 60s television show. Because I think the actor who was in the original series refused to do a cameo in this. Robert Conrad read the script and was like, no, this is garbage, and you're not paying any respect to the actual series and its characters. So why would I come and just do a cameo for you to help like get the people that liked my show to watch your shitty movie?
Mm-hmm. There were moments when all the artifices were failing, and you realize you're regarding disparate actors trapped on the screen that are fully aware that they've been left hanging out to dry, and you consider like that earlier scene where Will Smith and the sexy girl are kind of embracing in a water tank. Is it in the trailer? I think it's in the trailer.
It is, yeah.
The evil general rides into town. Will Smith is made to watch the action through a keyhole. I mean, while continue to make a romantic mid-air smooching movement. I mean, what the hell was that? With his lips as if he doesn't realize he's not still kissing the woman.
Uh-huh.
I mean, please. You see, I felt those were some of the misses that were like, was this really necessary?
It felt to me like it was something that we would have seen from him in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and something that may have actually been in an episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But it's like it's taking the tone of the film and trying to sell us sex and trying to sell us this moment and sell us action, but then it's taking it and like scaling it all the way back down to what the target audience for a show like Fresh Prince was realistically like kids that were me, that were like 10 and 11 who were watching it after school, right? Like Fresh Prince is not a show really for adults. Like you could watch it as an adult, but it's definitely geared to be skewing younger, right? Because like Will and Alfonso Ribeiro, they're in high school at the time. So when you're watching high school stuff, more often than not, you're at least like a half generation behind that. You're like 4 or 5 years younger because you're looking up to it, like stuff like Saved by the Bell that was on. I wasn't watching that like once I was past high school. So taking a concept and like a physical gag like that and inserting it into the very beginning of this movie while they're having sex in like the town's water tower that has been repurposed into like a weird brothel, sauna, something like that. It's just, it lets you know very early what kind of movie this is going to be. It's like, okay, here's like what's really happening, but we're going to focus on the main character in this moment of weird physical comedy. And that kind of happens like throughout the rest of the film as well, where they overlook maybe not the seriousness, but like the actual plot of things that's happening in order to focus more narrowly on the characters performing the kind of jokes that they thought were going to work.
Yeah. And talking of the main character, let's talk characterization. Let's talk about the supporting characters and even the whole concept of characterization. While watching this film, I felt that characterization too was a bit ropey, and at times the character Kline gives us an amiably absent-minded scientist, proud of his gadgets and easily distracted by them. Yet at others he seems cynically or cynical and condescending to his partner. And for a moment I felt that the decision to have him play the president was just too baffling. Yeah. And it made sense in Fierce Creatures when he was a father and son, but here it's contrived completely and convenient and not at all cute.
I'm curious. I'm sorry. I'm curious if it were something where he didn't maybe love the script or something, but they wanted Kevin Kline, and they're like, "We're gonna let you play both roles here, so you get to at least, as an actor, you're like, okay, well, I get to like be the more serious Ulysses S. Grant president, and then I get to be Gordon, and then I also get to be Gordon playing the president. So, like for Kevin Kline, who is a very, very good actor and who is, I believe, he's classically trained as well, for him to like sign on to this, given all of the things that you just said about his character, it wouldn't surprise me to think that his agent was like, well, they're going to pay you well, you get to do like a couple of different roles here, and as a performer there's a little bit more wiggle room for you to have fun. But in reading about this film, he in hindsight was like, oh yeah, like I was way too good for this movie, like what this movie ended up being, like I shouldn't have done this.
True, because for a moment I felt like he was absent-minded all through. He wasn't really into the film. He wasn't into the script at all. He was, oh, you're gonna pay me? Okay, fine, I'll show up. So where's the script? I just scribbled through it. I'm done. I ran my eyes through it. Then let's shoot. Yeah. So he could have done better. He would have done way better if it was something that he really felt he really wanted to execute in a much better way. Yeah, and I don't know what you have to say about Will Smith, how he executed his character.
I felt like in terms of like him being just like stylish and handsome and like shirtless half of the time, that's really kind of what they were going for. They're like, we want him to have sex appeal. Yeah, we want him to have sex appeal. We want him to be funny. We want him to wear his hat like off to the side, and his like gun holster is hanging down by his knees. So like he looks cool in costume, and he pulls that off fine. And before I watched this, actually, I sat down and I asked my girlfriend, like, are you interested in watching this with me? And she was like, the Will Smith movie? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, no, I can't do Will Smith right now. I was like, so what happened at the Oscars? Like, you can't watch this movie after that. And so I didn't even consider that. But in watching it and knowing that my most recent exposure to Will Smith was him slapping Chris Rock, it still didn't affect like my enjoyment of the movie, I would say. But if there's one thing that's a saving grace, is that you probably could have plucked Will Smith's character as is, with all like the weird jokes and the womanizing and all that. You could have plucked him out, scrapped everything else, and then put him back in and like built a story around him, and maybe it actually might have worked. But trying to mix him with Kevin Kline's character, with Kenneth Branagh's very eccentric, loveless character, and then throwing Salma Hayek in there to basically just like have her tits and ass on display the whole time and not really have much of a character. It's a waste of her. It's a waste of her as well, which she said after the fact too. She's like, I felt like I was wasted in this movie. But again, this movie cost what, $170 million. So they all got really nice paychecks to be in this disastrous film.
Yeah. I felt Will Smith was a bit loud.
Of course.
Yes, he's always this loud, smart-mouthed guy, and his persona always seems a little, anachronistic and in the Old West. But while in this new or Wild West, some of the race jokes work in his favor. Others are just clumsy and misconceived. And especially a sequence in which he must appease a lynch mob, and another that seems he sees that sees him doing a harem dance. I believed even the director hated it. Do you really think the director would have loved that? I don't think so. And perhaps most importantly, perhaps most importantly, the stakes in these things are too fuzzily defined. Why, for example, must Loveless be caught before the consensual railroad? Before it was inaugurated. Why was she supposed to be found there? And which is the super weapon tank, or what was the super weapon there? Why did we have it there? Why did we have that character being executed that way? Yeah, I felt it could have been done in some more decent way. And these racial jokes, I don't know if they really made sense in the 1990s, then they would have made sense today, because we don't need those racial jokes anymore, because we know what racial discrimination has done to people. Yeah. And I don't know. I didn't see fit if we needed those. I don't think we really needed the racial jokes.
I will say
We didn't
that
need them completely.
during the 1990s, there was this kind of air of post-racial America. Like, it wasn't, obviously, but they were trying to sell us on this idea that like racism didn't exist, and that it wasn't something that you had to be afraid of doing a stupid movie about. But I would say that Will Smith's character is introduced into this movie as if it's a sequel, like that we should know his character from another film, yet he's not playing the same guy that's from the TV show other than by name alone. So like I said, to cast him as a black man in this particular time period, and then really just make it all like off the cuff humor and not treat it with any reverence, not treat it with any respect, I think is a relic of that particular time period, where they're like, okay, like we can just like joke about him about to be lynched. We can joke about the fact that like his slave parents were massacred in New Liberty, and we'll have one sentence about that, and then we'll move on, because we don't want people really thinking about that too much. Like the idea that he escaped plantation as a child, ran to a free city, joined up in the army, and then went and saw his parents massacred in like one of the final battles of the Civil War. Like that character arc deserves a lot more respect than this film is willing to give it. And at that moment in the desert where he explains that particular journey of his character, it's like, okay, they pivot to the white guy who's like, I'm going to help you get him, Jim. And then the scene ends. And then it's like, okay, back to being a stupid buddy comedy in the middle of the desert. So I think just tonally, it doesn't understand or respect the history of the character that it wanted to put on screen, right? Because if he's just like a white guy and the story is the same, and you remove some of that like racial element and just make the story about this cowboy, and you keep everything the same except for that, it probably works better. But especially now watching it, I'm like, wow, that was a lot more pronounced to me. There's a lot more of the story that's directly tied into the South losing the Civil War and then wanting to get back stuff that they felt was taken from them. And that's like the villain's whole position in the film is he sacrificed half of his body to, fight for the South. And then his other generals at the time surrendered at the end of the Civil War. And so he like holds this resentment and this hostility towards them. And then even in the moment with Loveless, where we really like get to hear his backstory and his motivation when they're testing the cannon on General McGrath's men out in the field. That's a moment where we're really supposed to be finding out like how ruthless of a person this Loveless is. And he's still basically like cracking wise and giving like flippant remarks. So in a moment where a bunch of people are being massacred, the dialogue still pulls back from what's actually happening in order for him to like deliver some one-liners to General McGrath and then to his harem of women that are his scientists or his operators of his machinery. So it's another moment where you have a character who realistically, if you fleshed him out, like he does have an interesting story, being like a wounded soldier from uh the Confederate South who's trying to, seek revenge on the United States. Like that makes sense. But then like you scale it back and like you put him in this wheelchair, you cut him in half and you make him this caricature. You give him this like very, very weird facial hairstyle and you make him exceedingly eccentric. And so he doesn't even get to have like a real story. And there's a scene very early in the film where Will Smith like goes to his costume party and they're just like exchanging like insults and racial jabs back and forth at each other. And that scene is like, that goes on for way too long. But also it's like, what is the point of that? They both clearly hate each other, but because they're both like Southern, they're going to be polite enough within the context of this meeting where he's going to, throw racial terms at Will Smith. Will Smith is going to joke about his legs being missing or being half a man, etc. And none of the jokes are really funny. And they both get in maybe like 3 or 4 of them before they move on. But it's like none of it's funny. And I don't understand the purpose of it other than showing that these two like very clearly hate each other, which I mean, I don't think you needed to go through all of the dialogue in order to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah, sure. While watching this film, I completely agree with you. And while watching this film, I told my brother that I was watching this film. If he really minded, like I was like, would you mind watching it with me? And he was like, Wild Wild West? I was like, no, I'm not gonna watch any bad film this year. And I was like, oh my God, oh my goodness, is it that bad? Was it that bad? And I was telling my brother that while reviewing any bad film or while reviewing any bad movie, even a movie as wall to wall awful as Wild Wild West, one tries to come up with something good to talk about, something or anything. No movie is completely bereft of good points, right? And I think I chuckled once during the 107 minutes of Wild Wild West, but the rest of the film I felt was quite terrible. That I no longer remember exactly what it was that tickled me. So this is not so much to anybody listening there. This could not be so much a review as an inquiry into memory, as we attempt to recover the one tiny redeeming virtue, the needle in a shit stack that you found while watching this film. So was it really Will Smith who made me laugh? Of course not. And that really surprised me, because
Yeah.
I found him funny since Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and he made Independence Day and Men in Black, and his previous two, the July 4th, was it in what year was
Day.
that?
That was 95,
Exactly, yeah.
I think.
Yes, those blockbusters, they were bearable. Even watching Enemy of the State was great. Enemy of the State was well done. And he's playing smooth government agents, where he seems he he seemed to have entered the arrogant territory of Eddie Murphy Sucker in 1987. and I felt Smith showed little or no comic timing here. Yeah, because
That's fair.
he kind of felt, how can I even put it? I'm trying to be polite in a way. I don't want to be so hard on this film. I'm trying to put it in a way that, I might sound more rational. He basically shoots or bluffs his way through every scene, and an 1869 cowboy version of Axel Foley. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one scene that could have been funny when when West tries to get out of being hanged by a white lynch mob, instead sits there on the screen and dies of lameness. I felt that was quite absurd. When West came up with some weak rationale for playful slapping a woman's breast, I mean, did we really need that? I don't think so. But I feel it was growth for him in his career. But picking this movie to be casted in this film was a bad idea, and I'm glad he also agreed to that fact, and he also said that was his worst film. Yes, it was his worst film. It was good back then, but today, nah, we don't need it, because we've seen his potential. We've seen perfect films that, like Gemini, we've seen amazing films that he's done. And compared to what he did back then, he would have done better. Okay? He would have done better. And I hope even the After Effects techies and even the behind the scenes crews while working with some of our actors, I hope they get to even criticize the script before they sit down to work on it. I know it's business at the end of the day. People need to pay rent, people need to eat and pay bills, but let's sit down and criticize what we, before we shoot something. Let's criticize and say, I don't feel comfortable shooting this. I felt this could have been done in a better way by doing ABC. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes less is more, and that's something that I try to drive home, like in my personal taste for films and just in my life. Sometimes you don't have to do everything at once. Like doing one thing and doing it well is better than trying to do everything and failing at all of those things. And I will say that Will Smith was not, as much as I loved Men in Black and I enjoyed Independence Day perfectly fine and Enemy of the State as well. Like a lot of the other stuff he did in the 90s, I enjoy perfectly. But in this movie, he's not what I like about this movie at all. And I think that is because a lot of the writing, a lot of the delivery, and just in general, like it was probably hard for him to know like who his character is supposed to be because of the way that it was written. He's very rarely has any moments of being serious or being genuine. So in the couple of small moments where it actually does happen, it's like very alarming almost, where it's like, whoa, is he actually like being truthful right now? Because he hasn't been truthful at any point to this movie. He's been this other like, arrogant cowboy guy. So is he being genuine here? Like, is there something that's going to come from it? Like, oh no, we just wanted to like make sure that was in there because that was part of the original script. And we're going to keep it to 30 seconds though.
Yeah.
The stuff that I did like though, I loved Kenneth Branagh in this movie because he's so eccentric as Loveless. He's like, you got to think of like Kenneth Branagh is a classically trained stage actor, and for him to jump into this movie, and he said, I think in an interview that this is the worst like American accent that's ever been done, the worst American Southern accent that's ever been done by Brit. And I'm going to share this the introduction scene for him, because one of the other things that I actually really love a lot about this movie is the production value, because they spent a ton of money on making this movie look good, and it does look good. The costumes are awesome, the sets are awesome, and even down to like the way that they did Branagh's hair and his makeup and the effect of him being in the wheelchair. There's a lot of stuff in terms of like just filmmaking that I thought was very, very well done. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to share this, the introduction where we first meet Loveless. He first, I think, like pops out of the cake or whatever in his house, the Abraham Lincoln cake, no less. All right, so let's go.
Don't you just hate that song?
Really?
Why y'all look like you seen a ghost? It's me, dear friends, alive and kicking. Well, alive anyway. We may have lost the war, but heaven knows we haven't lost our sense of humor. No, not even when we lost a lung, a spleen, a bladder, 2 legs, 35 feet of small intestine, and our ability to reproduce, all in the name of the South? Do we ever lose our sense of humor? Now, I owe a deep debt of gratitude to our brethren across the sea for their comfort and kindness. So, mi casa es su casa. Bet comme chez vous. Let the party begin. Mr. Webb.
I guess we're going to get to see them exchange some of these lines here.
And add color to these monochromatic proceedings.
Well, when a fella comes back from the dead, I find that an occasion to stand up, be counted.
Miss East informs me that you're expecting to see General McGrath here. Well, I knew him years ago, but I haven't seen him in a coon's age.
Well, I can see where it'd be difficult for a man of your stature to keep in touch with even half the people you know.
Well, perhaps the lovely Miss East will keep you from being a slave to your disappointment.
Well, you know, beautiful women, they encourage you one minute and cut the legs out from under you the next.
Right. Excuse me, Mr. West. Thank you.
Yeah, Branagh, like you look at his face, like he's taking it at least somewhat seriously in that moment. But it's a good example in that scene of the writers wanting to show that at this point in American history, like that there was racism, but they handle it very subtly to where it's like they don't ever actually like say the N-word. They almost do in the very beginning, but will slap somebody in the face before the word can come out of his mouth. So it's like, hey, we want credit for showing that at this point in history, like racism was around, but we don't actually want to focus on the racism enough to take it seriously and have it be something that's part of the character and part of the story. So it's just very disingenuous in that way. But that's a great scene and a good example of why I love Kenneth Branagh in this movie, because like, you know, he's basically just confined to this chair the whole time and he has to make the most of what he has in front of him. And in that scene, there's also, I think her name is Millie East. So it's very much, we had talked earlier about the kind of the James Bond fanaticism. And you know, we did Film Club with GoldenEye, and the Bond movies were kind of coming back in popularity there during the mid to late 90s. And so she makes a joke of like, oh, it's East meets West. And in that scene, he introduces himself as West, Jim West. So it's very much like wanting to be a little Bond-like. And there was a couple times during the film where I was like, this is reminding me of Austin Powers in that, like the scene in that house still, like Kevin Kline is in drag. He opens up his belt and or it's actually the scene earlier in the film, but he's got like the little like hypnotic machine in his belt where he's trying to hypnotize General McGrath. That scene to me felt very much like it would have been in Austin Powers, but Austin Powers is also very self-aware that it's a parody of James Bond, and it's definitely intentfully humorous in a way that this film doesn't quite grasp. So this movie like wanted the credit for kind of like the Bond fans being like, oh yeah, it's like he gets the girl, he looks good, he solves the problem, he beats up the bad guy, he gets to deliver like zingy one-liners to the villain, and there's the character named Millie East, one of Kenneth Branagh's other assistant women. Her name is Mrs. Lippenreader, and literally what she does is read lips. And so she's just like a German that's in the background, like translating dialogue from lip reading in certain situations.
Yeah.
That scene on the boat that we talked about earlier, where they're introducing Loveless as like just kind of like this ruthless mechanical man, she is reading lips, and they like kept it in the script where she's like, she has binoculars and she's watching people die, and she says, oh no, please don't kill me, please stop, don't pull my arm. And so like they have her just like reading, or they have her like saying what the soldiers are saying like as they're being massacred, and they do it in this very like flippant, humorous kind of way. So it's just like the tone is not balanced even in like the smallest of moments there, because her delivery as like a German character, it has that particular tone in her voice. And even Salma Hayek mocks her at one point doing an impersonation of her, saying like, oh, is my hair going to get frizzy in the desert? Like so that very much caricatured style of character presentation. And in doing that, it's hard to ever like have any moments of seriousness, and it's also hard to have any moments of true levity, because there's never any like peaks and valleys. It's almost like plateaued in a weird middle ground the entire time. It's like, okay, the only thing that's consistent is that there's action. Like in terms of tone, it never really gets like deep, and it never like really gets high in terms of like comedy either. It's always like kind of in the middle, and the only thing like keeping it together is the fact that like they have to get to the end of the movie and there's going to be some like guns and stuff in it. So
Branagh also, compared to other characters, Branagh seemed to be having fun. So
yes.
I felt it was watchable.
Yeah,
For
correct.
example, the conference scene when he's handing out territories from the map, but is a completely non-threatening villain who's only interesting because of his weird facial hair. And Hayek is okay considering what little screen time she has. The character really is a waste though, and almost magically and implausibly reappears at the end, because you can't have a character we see at one moment, we don't know what has happened to them, then they just disappear, then reappears towards the end. And in fact, the only one to leave any impression at all is his cameo. It is a cameo role from actress Ling Bai as Miss East, yeah, and of course, Loveless head concubine. And it's a shame. It's a shame that such good actors are struck with such limp material, and at times you can see them try very hard to make it work and fail. And if there was any compliments to this movie, it would have to go to the effects and design people. Maybe because of the robotics, and even when we had Branagh on that moving like kind of chair. I mean, that was green screen, I guess.
Yeah, it had to be.
Beautiful. That was beautifully done.
It was.
It was beautifully done. If I had to give credit, that is some of the great credits that I would have given to that movie, because there's some great CG work in this, combined with a variety of interestingly designed costumes and mechanical appliances. And then again, considering $160 million budget, of course they should be good. Yeah. And there's nothing majorly wrong with the visuals of this film, and that really is what the key problem is here. And it's all style, absolutely no substance. Even poorly written, acted films can be great simply because they entertain me.
Yeah, for sure. There's I mean, that's a big business right now, for sure.
Yeah, true. So as much as I would have said that it was a lousy film and all that, I would give credit to the visual effects team. They did a good job when it came to doing their work.
Mm-hmm.
And even the DOP, I felt he could have done better. I saw a lot of lousy shots back then that could have been made, better in this time and age. But oh well, we are here now. It's already shot. They can only reshoot with Wild Wild West 2 or 3 or 4. But oh well, I don't know what would be the storyline. Even if they were to shoot it, what would be the storyline? Would it be something different with this amazing technology that we have right now in the film business? Yeah, so I don't know. I think that's that for me, that I would say for Wild Wild West. But to top off the insult of the film itself, it's one of the dullest opening credit sequence that I've ever seen, and as well as Will Smith annoying rap song title theme at the end. This is definitely not how the West was won. It's definitely not how the West was won.
Yeah, I also noticed the title scene on the intro, and I was like, yeah, this is really just like uninspired. It was just the music is what struck me in that scene, and that's what I was paying attention to. But really, it was very uninspired, like you said. I do want to give credit to Deborah Lynn Scott, who did the costumes. She did an amazing job with the costumes, and there's a ton of extras in multiple scenes in this film where they all had exceptional costumes as well. And her work has been excellent for many, many years. She did Titanic, she did Minority Report, Avatar, Back to the Future. She did Bad Boys too. She did Heat. So she did an excellent job in this film, and her work on the film makes the movie a lot more watchable. Like, if we were to have made a period piece that was this film, yet they shied away from the production, and like they didn't want to show you like kind of the robust kind of pretentious nature of the Southern costume ball, then you're gonna miss out on a lot of what the eyeball candy is in this film. And I want to say that also Bo Welsh, who was the production designer, did a fantastic job as well. I think despite the limitations of the CGI, like you said, the CGI was actually fairly good in this movie, and the design of kind of the steampunk mechanical stuff, the spider, the tank, the train, all of those things had a very identifiable quality. And Welsh was the production designer on the original Thor, Men in Black, Little Princess, Batman Returns, Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice. So you really had good people behind the scenes on the production side of things. And that's really like what stands out in this film, is that despite many of its pitfalls, it does look very good on screen. And as far as like a summer action blockbuster goes, it definitely has to look good on screen. So that was a big hurdle in this. And while I'm talking about this, and you had mentioned the CGI as well. So the 80-foot tarantula, this is an interesting story in that John Peters, who is the one of the producers on this. He was also the producer for the 1997 Superman movie that never got made, where Nicolas Cage was originally cast as Superman, and then
Wow. I didn't know that.
yeah, so there was like rumors for a long time of this movie happening, and it was going to be, I believe, Tim Burton was going to step in, so he was going to apply like the same kind of Batman lens to Superman, and it was going to be Nick Cage as a very quirky Clark Kent. And what happened was they took some test photos of Nick Cage in the Superman suit, and these photos went viral before viral was a thing. And as soon as people saw this, it basically submarined the entire project, and they had to bury it at that time. But John Peters, who was a producer on that movie, was obsessed with Superman fighting a giant spider in the film. And so because of that, they included the giant tarantula in this film, the giant mechanical spider. Let me see. Let me show you this Nick Cage picture as Superman. Since you haven't seen it, you have to see it.
I didn't know he was wow, very interesting.
Can you see this right here?
Yeah, I can. It looks funny.
Yeah, so it's like he had long hair at the time, and like these were just test photos, but as soon as people saw that, it was like, okay, we're not interested in this project anymore. And like Nick Cage is a very good actor, and he would have been good as Superman, or he would have been very good as Clark Kent. The Superman thing, I don't know, but nonetheless, it was that particular thing that submarined the movie. And Kevin Smith, who was hired to write the script for that film, was the one who had said in an interview that John Peters was like just obsessed with the idea of the giant spider. So they went ahead and included that just because like it's not practical at all for what the villain wants. Like even if he wants a big, robust war machine that's going to scare the United States, an armada of tanks like he was trying to sell to these other countries makes sense. Some other sort of more practical war machine than this spider that like seems like if it loses a little bit of oil pressure or something, the entire thing is going to collapse. And I mean, that ends up being the downfall of Lovelace's machinery at the very end when Artemis uses his one bullet to like fire a hole into the leg of his chair, and it sprays oil all over the place, and like everything just falls apart because of that small oversight, despite this being a giant spider that's going to have to obviously require a lot of maintenance to operate, and it's kind of clunky anyway, but it does have firepower. So just kind of interesting to see that the behind the scenes kind of stuff that happened in Hollywood, and that here's this idea that we wanted for a different movie, that we're not able to get this movie off the ground, but I'm so obsessed with this and I'm paying for this movie that you're going to make this a reality. So all things considered, they actually did a good job with like how the spider looks and how it operates and giving it like the giant cannon. But there's a scene where they first confront the president, Grant, at the time when he's trying to put the spike in the railroad. And he makes a joke about like, oh, you caught me at a bit of a disadvantage. I didn't bring my fly swatter. And it's like, why does that joke even work? What does the fly swatter have to do with a giant tarantula? It's just it's so I understand what they were going for, because it's like, well, we couldn't say like, oh, we couldn't say bug spray, or like they didn't have any other kind of idea to like really bounce the joke off of, so they just left it in there with fly swatter, even though fly swatter doesn't make sense in that context. And you had spoken about the wheelchair as well, and what they did with the green screen, and that was actually really good. And there was another scene, the scene where Will Smith comes and dances. Let me see, I'm gonna find it because we have to watch it. This is Will Smith in drag in this film, coming to seduce Kenneth Branagh while planning a giant escape here. It's one of like the most recognizable scenes in the film because of how bizarre it is. Like Artemis has all of these different costumes, and the only one that Will Smith feels that he can infiltrate this meeting of Southern sympathizers with is the exotic female costume. And we're going to take a look at that real quick. I want to see if the shot that I'm thinking of is in here. If not, I'll mention it after the fact. Let's see.
Shoot him in the head.
Damn.
Munition. Ready? Aim.
So I'm curious where this music is coming from too, because there's no band here.
A new girl. Oh, what a nice surprise.
And so the reason that this works, which they don't really get into earlier in the movie, is that Loveless is like a super pervert. And when they first rescue Rita from his house, she's in a cage in his bedroom. And when you see the bed, it's covered in all kinds of like whips and chains and swings and handcuffs and all kinds of like sex toys. So despite him not having lower body, he still is very much horny. And he jokes at one point when he first captures these two that despite his shortcomings, that his proficiency in I guess hydraulics would lead him to create some sort of like artificial penis for himself. And then they cut to a scene of the weird blade machine pumping back and forth, very phallic. So the only reason that this actually like succeeds as part of a plan is because Loveless is just like so horny that he can't do anything else but be completely infatuated with Will Smith showing up in drag.
Yeah.
Oh, he's so crazy.
But imagine like what this scene looked like on the page when it was written.
Yeah.
Like, it's not good, but it's still funny.
Kill him!
Giant flamethrowers in the bra. So that's just, it's one of those scenes where I don't think that it's like the defining scene, but it's not the only one. There's a scene with Artemis and him. I think you can see it there listed on the screen with the touch my breast screen, or the scene, I should say, where Will and him go back and forth saying like, no, now you got to touch my breast. And you have the train driver Coleman overhearing their conversation. Mm-hmm. And they end that scene with Artemis. I think he says like, oh my God, I'm hard, talking about his breast being filled with buckwheat, his fake woman breast being filled with buckwheat. But there's a lot of sexual innuendo and double entendre like that is laced into this movie, but they didn't want that to be like the thing either. So they kind of like, they painted over it a little bit, I would say, but it's still very much there. And one of my favorite lines in the movie, although it is stupid, is when Salma Hayek, like, she stows away on the train, or she gets launched into the train from outside, and she asks them for like something cozy to wear, and she's got the thing with like the butt flap hanging out, and Will was like telling Artemis, Jim West is explaining to Artemis that she's going to be a distraction by being on the train. Lo and behold, she is, but in that little like one-piece nightgown that she's wearing, like her ass is hanging out. And as she walks away, he reminds him, and he's like, I told you she was going to be a distraction. He says, no, she's a breath of fresh ass. And I love that line. I love that line in itself. And then, because Will looks at him at that point and says, you said ass. And so it's just like the realization that like she is a distraction and that it seeped into his subconscious where he had a Freudian slip. That's good enough. That's good enough right there. But then they had to keep going with it because they couldn't just let the joke die because they didn't write it well. And the scene continues and he says, "No, I said she was a breath of fresh air." And so he starts to realize that, oh no, I made a mistake too. And then the last, like Will gets the last line. He says, "No, let's get some shut ass." And so it's like you diluted the one joke that worked. Like the line that actually made sense in what you were doing worked. It was just breath of fresh ass. And then you stripped away all the effectiveness of that by like beating the audience over the head with it. Like, just in case you didn't get that joke, we're going to make sure that like we tell you 2 or 3 more jokes that are the same joke, but we want you to make sure that you understood ass, because like you just showed me her ass. I understand. Like, you don't have to treat the audience like you're stupid right there. So despite that, I still like that one line from that movie or from that particular scene. And you know what? There's another line that's always stuck with me, and it's after they are running from the magnetic blades, and they kind of like have their confrontation, and Will tells him like, you got to fix this because you're the master of the mechanical stuff. And again, this is a moment where Kevin Kline then just repeats this line or this phrase like 2 or 3 times before he says, "Oh yes, I'm the master of the mechanical stuff and you're the master of the stupid stuff." And then like that could have worked, but they didn't handle that scene very well. But then they tumble down into the water at that point, and his auxiliary toolkit comes flying out of his pocket. And it reminds me that there is a scene at the very beginning of the movie where, he's got all these spring-loaded contraptions flying out of his hands. And Jim West tells him like, "Artie, I think you underestimate the convenience of a pocket." And that is something that I love that line, because I feel like it's only one of the only like real smart, clever lines. Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's something that actually, like, throughout my life, like, because I have a lot of sisters, right? I have 5 sisters, so a lot of women's clothing doesn't come with pockets, but like, if you want to be stylish, you're typically wearing something that doesn't have a pocket anyway. So it's something that I've told to my sisters many, many times over and over again. I was like, I think you underestimate the convenience of a pocket. And so if there was one line that like stuck with me throughout throughout my life, like that's one of them. And I still think that's probably one of the best lines in the movie, because it understands the tone of where the film is at the time. It's there is a back and forth between the character interaction. You see Jim's style, you see Artemis's style, and in that moment, it's just a very honest observation from Jim about Artemis's kind of like over the top nature of having to like spring load everything. And then I think he says in the scene where they fall into the river, he's like, "Oh, what, you didn't have it hidden on some spring loaded contraption that shoots out of your ass?" And Artemis says, "No, that's the first place Lovelace would have looked." So it's like, that's kind of a moment where they want you to laugh, but Artemis is taking it too seriously. Like Jim is joking in that moment, but Artemis is taking it seriously. Like, "Oh no, like he definitely would have looked in that spring-loaded ass contraption that I have." So it doesn't quite land all the time, but that was a moment where I thought it actually worked pretty well. And you know what? We've talked a lot. We've talked a lot about all of the things that are, bad about this movie, and rightfully so, because in watching it, I'm like, "Oh, no wonder people don't like this movie." I was like, I still had fun with it, but in watching it, I was like, I totally get it. Like, it's all over the place. The dialogue isn't very good. You have really good actors that like don't know what they're doing because the script just doesn't like help them. But in that scene, right before Will Smith shows up in drag and starts trying to seduce Lovelace, there is a scene with a mounted camera on his wheelchair, and he's like in front of the map, and he comes out and he's driving the wheelchair, and so the camera is out here in front of him, and as he's moving, it's like it's tracking everything. And I thought that was actually like a really smart rigging shot for that camera, because one of like the only truly creative and
Well thought out of.
innovative camera shots in the whole film.
Yeah.
And it gives depth to that scene a little bit more, because that scene is about him basically taking over the United States and then divvying up power between Spain and France and Mexico and all these other sympathetic countries that want to support his cause. But it's a scene where it's like, it's all about him. So mounting the camera there on the front of his motorized wheelchair and allowing it to like track him. And it's also looking up at him a little bit too. So it's like, it gives him this like sense of grandiosity and importance in this moment. And it's one of like the very few moments in the film that uses its camera techniques to also tell a piece of the story subtly and to show us rather than beat us over the head with exposition. It's just like, here's this camera, it's attached to him and it's looking up at him. So the presentation is all about him, and he looks like big, even though he's physically very small. So I thought that was actually like a really brilliant shot, and it was just too bad that it was like surrounded with kind of the stuff that went with it. But I actually thought that was a fantastic shot.
Yeah, true. You're right. One shot that I really looked forward to was when the spider, when the spider was moving and distracting stuff. I thought I really wanted the aerial shots and beautiful aerial shots, and just have an aerial shot go round the spider to give us different angles of how the eye would look at it, a 360 degrees version of the whole shot. And even the shot underneath, how people on the ground would see this giant spider, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's something that I missed, and I wished the directors would have given us. That I don't know. I really missed it.
Can you see the screen right now? My presenting.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this is the first introduction to the spider that you're talking about. They come across this city, and they realize that Loveless has his own city, and it's actually a very nice moment of production design as well. That this is like this very much like steampunk design, like lots of metal, lots of glass, lots of kind of like brown and black tones as well. So it's very steampunk, and it's a great introduction for this spider.
Yeah.
And so you get the characters just like staring up in awe. And there's, Jim taking a jab at Artemis not being a good inventor for no reason.
If a little ungainly. Look, he's trapped. I think he'll never get past those rocks.
You realize that they're not aerial shots?
Yeah, it would have been cool if they did something like that. I mean, if you were to film this today and you had like drone technology, you could really have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
So
whenever the 60 version of it would be great.
Whenever Michael Bay makes Wild Wild West 2, and he'll go drone crazy with it. And speaking of which, you had mentioned like what would they do for a sequel here, and I mean, you could imagine that like Jim West slapped the president and got fired from the Secret Service, and now he's disgraced, and he has to live a life as just like a regular cowboy, but Artemis has to go recruit him back for one special mission to rescue the president or something like that. I think there would be room to make a sequel to this. I don't think any of the participating players would agree to do it because because most people that worked on this movie thought that it was awful in hindsight. So I can totally understand nobody would ever want to do it, but I think you realistically could make a sequel to this movie that is good. I just don't think anybody would sign on to actually produce it.
Yeah, true. Because owing to the fact that it was a loss, or rather a pathetic film, like it had negative reviews,
Yes.
I don't think there's any production outlet out there who'd want to be involved in it.
Correct. And speaking of the negative reviews, this is something that I do on this show is we look at some of the most negative reviews and we bring those to light. So this movie has a 38 on Metacritic, which is worse than its 4.9 score on IMDb. And I totally understand both of those scores. I would not necessarily even disagree with either of them. And so the worst review is from Ron Wells at Film Thread. He says, aside from the pesky problems of tone and lazy writing, the whole movie is a little choppy. So he understands that, yeah, there's definitely tone, there's definitely lazy writing, and realistically, it's all just kind of like smashed together. Roger Ebert mirrored something that you said, I think, word for word. For the Chicago Sun-Times, he said it's all concept and no content.
Yeah.
So you said those exact words earlier in the show. We have Austin Chronicle. It says the script by S.S. Wilson and Brent Maddock is so jumbled and the direction so chaotic that it's often hard to tell what's going on, where, when, and why. Ernest Hardy from film.com says the humor is at best thudding. At worst, it's breathtakingly stupid and offensive, which I agree with. And so none of those scores gave it more than a 3 out of 10. And so now I want to look at some of the positive scores and see what those critics would have to say about this movie. And so Stephanie Zakaric from Salon said, a movie that's dazzling as you watch it and immediately unsatisfying afterwards. And so she gave it a 7 out of 10 for Salon, which is surprising considering what she said, but it does recognize that like the costumes are awesome, the CGI is really good, the production design is really, really good, and you know, it's only an hour and a half, so it's like I think you're so busy just like in the middle of it that you don't realize like how bad it is until you like sit down and think about it afterwards.
Sure.
Bob Graham from the San Francisco Chronicle said a sly variation on the Buddy movie, which is something that I mentioned. Chicago Reader, this is Jonathan Rosenbaum, says an entertainingly offbeat blend of 19th century science fiction and Hope and Crosby Road comedies. And that he gave it an 8. And the last one from Peter Burnett at film.com said lots of laughs, lots of fisticuffs, lots of cool toys, lots of stuff getting blown up. Who could ask for anything more from a summer movie? So I'm glad that at least he saw this film for what it was, right? He's like, this movie isn't intended to really be good. It's intended to be successful. And I think this movie's biggest hurdle is that in its attempt to be so broadly appealing that it really fails to be narrowly appealing in any of its smaller windows. But I still had fun watching it.
Yeah, sure. I also had fun watching it, and I think I considering now that I've grown this much in the film industry, even in the critique business, the way I looked at it I looked at it 23 years ago is not the same way I looked at it today, and that's quite amazing, you know. But I hope we've learned from, like, as movie producers, we've learned from the mistakes that, you know, other movie producers have made, and I guess that's why we have very bomb-ass movies in the cinemas today. So that's a great step forward.
Since we talked about a lot of why this movie is not a good movie, if you were telling somebody to watch it, what would be the thing you tell them is the reason to watch it?
Great CGI. Great CGI.
End of story.
End of story. Great CGI. That's it.
I mean, we chose
like who would have pulled such great CGI in the 1999?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, who would have pulled such great CGI in the year 1999? Yeah,
they definitely spent money on it.
Yeah, 2000s would have understood. Yeah, 2010 yes, 2020 definitely yes, but 1999, that was great. I mean, the CGI was top notch.
Yeah, and this is a movie that cost $170 million to make, and it barely
$170 million.
Yeah, it barely made that back, including foreign box office. So worldwide, it made 222 back, but still, like, it definitely struggled, and it underwent a lot of costly reshoots as well. And I'm reading here. It says the characters of Spike Guy and Knife Guy at the end that Will Smith fights. He said they were added to the movie and inserted into the climax after test audiences found the heroes fighting only Loveless's beauties. So that was like, I think her name was Munitia, and so it's like she obviously makes bombs or something. Fighting only them to be very odd. And you had guys like Mel Gibson was attached to this at one point with Richard Donner, who directed Superman. And that was a script by Shane Black, who was in Predator, who made a Predator movie, who did the Lethal Weapon stuff. So, there was names attached to this. Tom Cruise was attached to this as well, but they left. And I think he did Mission Impossible instead in 96, and Mel Gibson and Richard Donner and Shane Black, I think, left to do Maverick in 94. So this was a movie that was in production like much earlier than 1999, but they were struggling to find the right tone for it. And obviously, you had a lot of people pass on this as a result. And I think, you see that on screen. But it does say that, like, the reason that Kenneth Branagh is so good and why I love him in this, it says he immersed himself in the Civil War to, like, really bone up on his character. So you see in the moments where he's talking about the war itself and the war effort, like, he's into it. And he plays his character very genuinely. And I think he understands, like, who his character is more so than many of the other characters in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you say that there were characters who were supposed to be in that film but pulled out?
Yeah, there were some actors that were attached to it. Tom Cruise was attached to play the lead at one point. George Clooney was attached. He was attached to play Artemis Gordon, but I guess his agent had him turn it down because it was a supporting role. The part of Rita, so Salma Hayek's role, was offered to Jennifer Lopez and Penelope Cruz, who both turned it down. It said the only building that was not destroyed in Silverado is the Lucky Hotel. So it's a little, like, piece of trivia there. Let's see. Tim Curry, so the clown from It, from Rocky Horror Picture Show, Johnny Depp, and Matthew McConaughey were all considered for the role of Artemis Gordon. So, here we go. The scene where Loveless's train was raised on 4 girders outside the train tunnel were all done digitally. Duh. A real train was used. Oh, really? I thought they built hydraulics to lift this train off the track. Like, that would be completely inexpensive. A real train was used when it finally got back on the track. Will Smith admitted that this is his worst movie to date. I don't know. That's basically it. The movie bears significant resemblance to Batman, the animated series Showdown featuring Jonah Hex. Interesting. I'll have to watch that. Jim West says that he was a member of the 9th Cavalry during the Civil War. This is an anachronism, as the 9th Cavalry wasn't created until a year after the war ended. The 9th was a segregated unit in the U.S. Army comprised of white officers and black enlisted men. They served on the Western frontier against Native Americans and later in the Spanish-American War. And that's the last bit of interesting trivia that I have for you.
That's quite interesting because I saw it was rated at 16% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's it? 16.
16% on Rotten Tomatoes and 4.9 over 10 on IMDb and 38% on Metacritic. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and 71% of Google users liked this film. Very interesting.
That is, yeah, because
very interesting for that matter.
You and I both like this film. We brought it to this show, which is called Bad Movies We Love. Like, we obviously have some connection to this film that a lot of people don't. And, like, I understand why it's bad, but let me ask you this then. When you first saw this movie, whether it was 23 years ago or whenever you first saw it, what was the thing about this movie that you actually loved?
Like I said, CGI. Two, the costume, the costume, and three, the choice of location where it was shot. That was amazing. CGI or not, even if all that location was computer generated, I don't care. It was well thought out. It was good. Choice of characters was great, but I felt they underutilized the characters. Okay. What else did I love about this film? I didn't like the music. Okay, I love the music, the theme music at the beginning, but later on, I didn't like the music per se. Of course, I hated the dialogue. It was forced. What else? Okay, I'm now not answering the question. Ask me what I loved about the film, not what I didn't like about the film. What else did I like about the film? I think that's it. That's it. But something that really stands out for me is the CGI.
That's fair. And at the time, I think it was something that we hadn't seen a ton of. For me, the things that I love about this film, I love Kenneth Branagh's performance. Like I said, I love the production and the set design. I love the cast, despite them struggling with a rough script and a rough rewrites and reshoots. And I think in hindsight, seeing it now as an adult versus seeing it as a kid when I was in high school, one thing that I loved about it now is that it's completely chaotic. Like this thing doesn't move really in a straight line at all. It's all over the place. And like the more I've gotten to know about film and filmmaking, the more I've talked about film, the more I've watched film and better versions of similar ideas.
Yeah.
The more that this movie as just like a complete production disaster stands out to me. And I kind of love the idea that like this movie just like we're gonna find a way to get it made. It doesn't matter how much the script doesn't work. It doesn't matter how much the actors are not like in tune with their characters. It doesn't matter how long it takes to get this movie made, because obviously it was getting considered like earlier in the 90s, so it's probably taken 5 to 7 years to get it produced and made. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether or not we're on budget for this movie. Just nothing mattered other than getting this movie made and released in the 90s when you could capitalize on Will Smith's popularity from Men in Black and some of the other things he's done. So I kind of like just that idea that the producers and the filmmakers were not going to take no for an answer, and that they were going to find a way to jam this product into the market when they could make it semi-profitable. And that still almost backfired, because like if this movie releases in like 2002, 2003, it probably doesn't even make its money back. So the idea that they were able to get this out like a couple years down the line from Austin Powers, a couple years after Men in Black, a couple years, like 4 or 5 years after Independence Day, they were still able to like scrape the bottom of the barrel and walk away. If the estimates are true at 170 million, they were still able to walk away with about $50 million in box office profit. So the fact that this movie even made money, I find
I can see it made 222.1 million US dollars, and the budget was 170 million US dollars.
But if you look at the U.S. gross, it only made 113 million. So just relying on the United States box office, like the U.S. obviously was like, this movie's not good, but it made it made a little over 100 million in foreign markets to save it. But that's because of the star power. It was like, okay, this is a crazy, chaotic sci-fi Western, but it's got Will Smith, who wasn't an Oscar winner at the time, but is now. Salma Hayek, who's nominated for an Oscar at some point after that. Kevin Kline, who I think won an Oscar before that, and Kenneth Branagh, who also had won an Oscar before that film. So I just love that this is such a microcosm of the 90s. Like this is such a time capsule movie that, you know, maybe like 40, 50 years from now, if you were to look at filmmaking in the 90s and look at how eccentric and how crazy it was, this would be a perfect example to show somebody down the line and be like, oh, you want to see what movies were doing in the 90s? Like, take a look at this.
Yeah, Look at what directors were doing in the 90s.
Right? Look at how many people signed on to get this movie made. And
Can you imagine?
yeah, look at John Peters, who just like he was obsessed with a giant tarantula for some reason, and so they forced it into the movie. There's tarantulas in several scenes in this movie, so you can tell that somebody behind the scenes was like, I'm into spiders right now. So we're gonna have a cake that's covered in tarantulas.
And you ask yourself, how the hell did Warner Brothers decide to distribute this film? What did they see on this film? But anyway, it's all good.
Well, you consider now that Warner Brothers just scrapped their Batgirl project like a couple months ago. They announced like, we're not even going to continue making this movie. We already shot it, but we're not going to finish it. So like that tells you movie making in 1999 versus movie making now. Wild Wild West, they're like, we're putting money into this movie until we're going to ride this thing until it crashes and burns, and we're going to spend as much money as it takes to get this movie made. And then Batgirl now in 2022 is like, well, the movie's done. Can we edit it and put it out? And they're like, no, we're not going to spend any money promoting this movie. So you're done. This movie just goes in the can.
Let's not be that hard on this film. It was nominated for Kids' Choice Awards for favorite movie actor.
Hey, there you go.
An Alma Award for outstanding actress in a feature film. Feature film. Can you imagine? It was nominated. That's all that matters now.
That's surprising. Hey, but you know what? The Kids' Choice Awards like have some pull, and so that tells me that this movie was, certainly aimed at a younger audience, because a lot of the themes that would have made it. Yeah. A lot of the themes that would have made it more adult and more palatable in terms of being a good film beyond that small release window, like something that would make it still a tangible, understandable movie in terms of its themes today, would have been the stuff like the racism and the Civil War stuff and the division between the South and the North and that kind of stuff. But this did win. Yeah, it won top soundtrack from American Music Awards. And like you said, Salma Hayek won favorite supporting actress from the Blockbuster Entertainment Awards. Kids' Choice Awards, it won favorite song from a movie because, well, obviously, like that's the most iconic thing from this movie is maybe the soundtrack and maybe that Will Smith song. What else? Yeah, we did win some Razzies. Worst picture, worst screen couple, worst director.
Yeah. Oh, no, worst picture. Sorry.
Worst screenplay.
My bad. Oh,
it won worst original song. It was nominated for worst actor, worst supporting actor, worst supporting actress, and worst supporting actress. Oh, Kevin Kline got nominated for worst supporting actress for his role as the prostitute. So it really dominated the Razzies. It won 5 of them and got nominated for 4 others. So obviously people were not super high on this film, but if you look at the MTV Music Awards, it was nominated for best video from a film. And of course it was, because I'm sure a certain amount of the production budget went into making that music video with Will and Cisco.
Oh yeah, interesting.
I would assume so, because Warner Brothers is including that as an original song, and you don't want to have to put it on Will Smith's label to pay for that. So probably part of getting Will to agree and getting it in his contract was that Warner Brothers, they might have even been the primary like stakeholder of Will's record label at the time. I would have to look, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Warner be like, yeah, we're going to co-write and pay for all of the stuff for the music video and for the song. So that way, like Will Smith as the client gets a hit song and a hit single out of it. Plus we're going to pay him to make the movie. That song was popular, man. I still knew it. Like when it came on at the end of the movie, like I knew the words and I was like, oh, wow. I was surprised that I knew as many of the words as I did. I was like, it's been 20 years since I listened to this.
Yeah.
Good stuff, though.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
Cool. Thank you, man. I appreciate your time. You got any closing thoughts on this movie? Anything we didn't cover?
Really nothing. In fact, I was just checking out the song after you told me that. Did I? Yeah, I remember the song. I just saw it on YouTube. Yeah, but featuring Drew Hill and Cool Madu.
Oh, it was
Cool
Drew
Mo
Hill.
D.
Drew Hill,
Cool
not
Mo
Cisco.
D.
That's right.
Drew Hill and Cool Mo D.
Yep.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Who's that?
Kumo
Don't
D
know who that
was
is.
he was more famous, I think, probably during like the late early to mid '90s, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
not huge in my musical circle, but definitely a rapper that was known. Yeah, I'm thinking it was the '80s was his hits. Yeah,
Yeah.
mostly mid to late '80s, and then early '90s was when he got famous.
Oh, interesting. I'll listen to the song. My final comments on this film. First of all, it has already received very bad ratings on all the film critique sites. I mean, I don't
Indeed.
even need to. I don't even need to. I mean, rather kind of rate it anymore. It would be unfair of me. I've already spoken trash about this film, but here we are again. I think. Movie makers need to, of course, they've learned from their past mistakes. I don't think the creators of that film will ever do such a mistake again. We are learning the international film scene is growing, and it has grown. It keeps on growing, and it was good when it lasted back then in the 90s. I just hope Will Smith keeps on making good films, and he keeps on, sitting down and even thinking, and even other actors out there, you sit down and think twice before you make a film. You don't just go out there to make a film for the sake to get money, because at the end of the day, this film made only $50 million profit, right?
Yeah.
All close to $50 million profit. And that was so bad. I mean, we've seen films make up to $1 billion as profit. So that was way, 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 way too low. So I hope we learn from the past mistakes as creatives. And my final thoughts about the film, it could have been better, but here we are.
It could have been better. I mean,
It could have been better. But here we are now.
That's going to be the pull quote from your Rotten Tomatoes review. It just says it could have been better.
Oh yeah, I mean for sure, could have been better. But here we are.
Here we
Too
are.
soon. Too bad.
We're talking about it 23 years later, because obviously this movie still had a place in our memory and in our hearts from all those years ago. And like I said, I still enjoyed watching it. But I could see much more clearly as an adult why everybody else has crapped on this movie for 20 years.
Yeah.
All right, my man. Thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure, as always. Good to talk to you again. I know you said you were working on something like maybe your first TV show. Do you want to tell us what that's about while you're here?
I'm still working on it, and right now I have a TV show. I have a TV show going on. Sorry, I had opened the film. Sorry, I had opened the Joker film. I had even forgotten that I had opened it, but it's okay. What can I really say about my project? I'm working on a project, a TV series. It's a drama TV series. It's ongoing. This is something that I'm doing with a local TV production house. So it's gonna be easy on my side. So we kick off next week. We kick off shooting next week, and it's gonna be great. And I'm just looking forward to an amazing journey ahead. And by the way, I'm supposed to send you a few links to the jobs that I've done this year.
Okay.
I kept on saying that I'm gonna send you the links. Okay, I'm gonna send you after this Google Meet or podcast, and it's gonna. I hope you get to enjoy every bit of it.
Yeah, I mean, you shared some of your photography with me, and there were some excellent photos in there, and I encouraged you to, share those around a little bit more, because there's some really good stuff in there, and I think, when you put something online, you're always going to have the risk of kind of, weird people deciding to just be like tear you down. But realistically, I think you'll get more positive feedback than not, and you know submit some of that stuff. I mean, even if it's only like one photo that you really like, there was some really cool stuff in there. And so I know you have a good eye for framing things. And so, yeah, definitely share the link with me. One question that I should probably ask you that we started doing at the end of the film club, that it's a question that I like because it's open to interpretation. If people liked Wild Wild West, what would be a film that you would recommend to either someone who's a fan of the film, or if someone hasn't seen Wild Wild West, what's a film that you think they may have seen that's a good comparison point? So either give us a recommendation for something you think we would like if we've seen it, or something if we haven't seen Wild Wild West that would encourage us to make the journey to see it.
There's this film by Spielberg, Schindler's List.
Schindler's List.
Yeah. If you want to watch Wild Wild West, or if you don't get to like Wild Wild West, I'd recommend you to watch Schindler's List. It would maybe guide your thoughts towards watching Wild Wild West. And I hope you get to watch Wild Wild West, because, I mean, if you watch it as a critique like us, both me and Nick, then you won't enjoy the film. If you just watch the Wild Wild West as a normal fanatic or a normal viewer, movie fanatic, then you're going to enjoy it. But if you start looking deep into everything that, evolved throughout from the beginning to the end, then you're going to miss the point. Like most of us miss the point, when watching it.
Yeah, they didn't really have a great point.
Yeah,
it's not our fault.
It's not our fault. It's not our fault at the end of the day. Yeah. So Schindler's List, and there's this new Spielberg film, the musical one.
West Side Story.
West Side Story. Yeah, those two films.
That's not what I was expecting. That was not what I was expecting.
Really?
But yeah, I was not expecting that to be the movies you choose to connect to Wild Wild West. But I appreciate that, because I'm glad it wasn't something predictable. For me, if you like Wild Wild West, you would probably like Cowboys and Aliens. And if you never saw Wild Wild West, but you liked Cowboys and Aliens, then see, that's a direct line. They're both sci-fi westerns. Sure. I wasn't thinking Schindler's List, but I'm really glad that you threw that out there.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I chose you as the co-chair for our film club for a reason. And yeah, I'm sure we'll do this again at some point. At any time where you just feel like you want to talk, or you got some work that you want to share or anything like that, you reach out to me. You'll always be able to get my attention, and we can hop in the booth and record a show. So you just let me know. But again, thank you so much for being here. Stay on the line after I stop recording, because I got to talk to you about something else. But as always, appreciate your time and your thoughts on one of our childhood favorites.
True, definitely. Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you so much for always, just spending your time to let us, just talk about films, the things we love, the things we don't like. And we do it so effortlessly, and it's so amazing. And there's nothing that beats, for like I always say, nothing beats passion. Something that you're not paid to do, and you still find time to do it, and you do it so effortlessly and so passionately. I mean, that's it. Keep on doing it. So thank you for just opening up this avenue and giving me that opportunity to even be here with you and co-host that, co-found and co-host that film club with you, and even the guys that are in there. I mean, I really enjoy and respect their choices and what they have to say about films, and I really learn a lot from them, and even from you. I really learn a lot from you. So that is something that is quite encouraging to me as a young filmmaker and as a young film critic. Really means a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's kind of like what the idea was anyway, was to get a lot of people that are passionate about the same thing in the same place and kind of just let things happen. So I think we've got a good group. We've had some really good discussions. Our last one, we did like 2 hours, no problem. A little bit long, I think, for the average person to listen to it. So it didn't quite get as much attention as some of our other ones, but it still did pretty well. If you're listening to this, enjoy whatever movies you enjoy them however you get them, and
Sure.
make sure you stay safe, be well, and take care, everybody. Thank you once again to Ayoo for joining me to discuss a movie that is very near and dear to my heart. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I know you have a lot of options when it comes to how you get your movie podcast entertainment. And if you took the 2 hours to sit down and listen to us, I really do appreciate it. And I still do believe that word of mouth is the best way to help. So if you liked what you heard, please tell somebody. But liking, subscribing, and rating the podcast actually goes a long way too. This show is an extension of thesheist.com, and it's recorded, edited, mixed, produced right here in studio by yours truly. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd just like to get in touch with me in general, you can email me at nick@thesheist.com, or you can find me at Bad Movies We Love, that's LUV, on Twitter. And until next time, take care.